In Borova direction, Kharkiv Oblast, Russians launched a hurried counterattack to try and halt the Third Assault Brigade's advance. However, the attack failed disastrously as the elite Ukrainian unit turned the Russian assault into a massacre, shredding nearly half a Russian battalion in one day alone, according to Euromaidan Press media outlet. The Ukrainian goal is to undermine the upcoming Russian spring offensive towards Borova and Lyman by launching a crushing counterattack to eliminate the Russian bridgehead over the Zherebets river, which the Russians planned to use to launch their offensive. The Russians understood the critical nature of the situation, so they launched a hurried response across the front line to stop the Ukrainian advance. Due to the shortage of armored vehicles, Russian forces were forced to rely solely on infantry, saving their limited armored reserve for the final offensive itself. Euromaidan Press says, additionally, the marshy riverbanks and lack of viable crossing points forced Russians to deploy makeshift pontoon bridges meant to allow large groups of infantry to make it across and overwhelm the Ukrainian defences. However, due to the makeshift bridges' proximity to Ukrainian lines, Ukrainians were able to detect, target and destroy them almost immediately. The Third Assault Brigade had established strong defences here, locking down and preventing any Russian infiltration attempt through them, as these defences proved insurmountable in the previous months of Russian attempts to do so. For this reason, Russian commanders decided to launch their attacks across open fields instead, assuming that the losses, while high, would still be lower than if they tried to take on Ukrainian defences head-on. Euromaidan Press reports, to avoid immediate and complete destruction, Russian soldiers used tactics specifically meant to reduce casualties to drone strikes by keeping a large distance between them and only moving in pairs of 2 soldiers at a time. Unfortunately for Russians, Ukrainians had enough drones in reserve as they released a 2.5-minute compilation of close to 100 individual FPV drone strikes. However, as the assault force consisted entirely of infantry, Ukrainians deployed specific 5 to 7-inch large kamikaze drones, which are very fast and agile due to their small size. While their agility was high enough to allow Ukrainians to hit the smaller targets individual Russian soldiers presented, they still carried enough explosive payload to achieve the desired effect. Ukrainians also deployed reconnaissance drones to observe the effectiveness of the kamikaze strikes, armed with drone-dropped grenades to finish off any misses. These drones could also point out targets for the FPV drone operators, allowing for maximum efficiency. During the defense, Euromaidan Press says, during the Russian assault, Russians lost over 229 soldiers, nearly half a Russian battalion in one day. During the whole week of Third Assault Brigade operations, they managed to eliminate a total of 446 Russian soldiers, 16 artillery pieces, dozens of armoured vehicles and trucks in the rear, and 10 makeshift bridges Russians deployed to facilitate the crossing. Overall, the Third Assault Brigade has successfully thwarted the Russian attempt to salvage their bridgehead across the Zherebets river, allowing for a continued push to eliminate and clear the remaining Russians from the area fully.
Russian army has lost record 140,650 number of troops in Ukraine war since the start of the year, Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Oleksandr Syrsky wrote on Telegram on Saturday. Attempts by the occupiers to break through our defense have resulted in record losses for the Russian invaders, Syrsky said. Syrsky thanked the soldiers for their resilience and accuracy. Russia lost 1,240 soldiers, 2 multiple rocket launch systems, and about 50 artillery systems in the war in Ukraine from April 11 to 12, the General Staff of Ukrainian Armed Forces reported. According to the General Staff, as of the evening of April 11, 347 Russian troops were neutralized on the Pokrovsk direction, 105 of whom were killed. In addition, Ukrainian forces destroyed 1 armored fighting vehicle, 2 artillery systems, 17 vehicles, 3 units of special equipment, an electronic warfare system, and a UAV control point. They also damaged 3 artillery systems and 3 vehicles.
Ukraine is bracing for a new major offensive from Russia as Moscow's forces step up attacks on Ukrainian positions. Kiev says Russian reserves are being stockpiled in preparation for another major assault, The Telegraph reports. However, analysts say Vladimir Putin's ambitions to seize new territory before a possible peace agreement are unlikely to be realized. The reason is numerous problems, weak organization and a lack of equipment in the Russian army. Observers note that the Russian troops have almost exhausted their reserves of tanks and armored vehicles. Even with small tactical successes, Russia will not be able to use them due to limited resources. Additionally, Ukraine's ability to strike accurately with drones makes it difficult for Moscow to deploy significant forces to the front lines, making a major breakthrough unlikely. Dmitry Zmailo, executive director of the Ukrainian Center for Security and Cooperation, told The Telegraph, "For now, any Russian offensive on the front lines is impossible. Russia has no major military victories on the front lines, so they want to create the impression that there are huge movements and advantages. We do not see this on the ground." Last month, Volodymyr Zelenski and G7 leaders warned that Russia was planning new attacks, particularly in the direction of the Sumy and Kharkiv regions, which could give Putin an advantage in future negotiations. Ukrainian Armed Forces Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky confirmed that offensive actions have already begun. The intensity of Russian attacks has increased significantly. Meanwhile, Kyiv is trying to keep the world's attention focused on the situation in Ukraine despite the absence of a peace agreement on Donald Trump's agenda. However, John Hardy, Deputy Director of the Russia Program at the Foundation for Defense and Democracies, is convinced that the increase in attacks will not lead to significant success. What we are seeing is just a surge in the tempo of the assault. It is a very small scale. They can punch a hole in the Ukrainian line, but they are not able to punch that hole and achieve a rapid, operational, significant breakthrough. The Sumy region, where Ukrainian troops are regrouping after rapid Russian advances in the neighboring Kursk region, is considered to be the most potentially vulnerable. One Ukrainian soldier who fought near Kursk told The Telegraph that the retreat had been taking place overnight in small groups. A lot of equipment was left behind, he said. Hardy notes that attacks are mostly carried out by small groups without significant technical support, as resources are limited. Company-sized attacks, about 100 soldiers, are rare. Over the past year, Russia has lost about 3,000 tanks, 9,000 armored vehicles, and at least 13,000 artillery systems. Hardy says, if you look at what's left in the warehouses, especially what's serviceable, the stocks are getting pretty low. I expect that by the end of this year, they'll be very hard pressed to continue the war. They'll be completely depleted. Russia has the advantage of numbers. Putin recently signed a decree calling up another 160,000 men. However, as Hardy notes, these recruits receive minimal training, often no more than a month. This is a conscious choice that Russia is making to keep the pressure on Ukraine, to throw these troops into the meat grinder without wasting time on restoring the quality of forces while the war continues. Ukraine's main task now is to prevent a large number of Russian troops from concentrating in one place, which could become a prerequisite for a breakthrough. The use of drones plays a key role in deterring the aggressor. Hardy says Ukraine is expanding its best drone units and, in general, is relying on unmanned systems to make up for shortcomings in other areas. They have adapted well to the way Russia fights, the expert said.